Without a word, he turned and walked out of the pub, leaving the stunned silence and the weight of his shattered past behind him. But the fight was far from over. The battleground had merely shifted. Home. The word was supposed to mean safety, a refuge from the world. But as Aaron turned the key in his lock, a primal instinct screamed that something was wrong. The door swung open a fraction too easily, not quite latched. A sliver of cold dread traced its way down his spine. He pushed the door open slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. And there he was. Kev was standing in the middle of his living room. He wasn't ransacking the place or waiting in ambush. He was simply occupying it, absorbing it, his very presence a contamination of Aaron's private space. He was looking at a photograph on the mantelpiece, one of Aaron and Liv, smiling on a rare, carefree day. "Nice place," Kev said, not turning around. His voice was calm, conversational, which was infinitely more terrifying than if he had been shouting. "Cozy. You can see why you wouldn't want anything to happen to it." Aaron shut the door behind him, the click of the latch sounding like a chambered round. He remained by the door, putting as much distance between them as possible, his mind racing, calculating angles, escape routes. "What are you doing in my house?" "Just wanted to chat. Privately," Kev said, finally turning. He had a look of serene confidence, the absolute certainty of a man who knows he holds all the power. He began to walk slowly around the room, his hands in his pockets, inspecting Aaron's life as if he were a prospective buyer. He picked up a small object, weighed it in his hand, and put it back down. Every movement was a violation, an assertion of dominance. Aaron remained silent, his body coiled with tension. He let Kev walk, let him talk. He needed to understand the nature of the threat. This wasn't a fistfight in a pub. This was something else. Something colder. "Robert's a good man," Kev began, his voice taking on a thoughtful, almost philosophical tone. "But he's complicated. He feels guilty about you. Thinks he owes you something. That guilt. It's a loose end. And I don't like loose ends." He stopped in front of Aaron, his eyes locking onto him. There was no heat in them, no anger. Just a flat, chilling emptiness. "I protected him inside," Kev stated simply, as if explaining the basic law of physics. "He got into some trouble, some lads decided he was fresh meat. I put a stop to it. I made him mine to protect. We built a life in there, a way to survive. He thought he was never getting out. So did I. He gestured vaguely to the world outside the window. "This is a bonus. A second chance. And he's my second chance." He took another step closer, invading Aaron's personal space. Aaron could smell the stale scent of tobacco and something metallic on him. "You are a complication," Kev said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're a reminder of a life he needs to forget. Every time he sees your sad, pathetic face, it pulls him back. It makes him weak. And I can't have him being weak." Aaron's chin lifted in defiance. "This has got nothing to do with you." Kev smiled, a thin, cruel slash across his face. "Oh, but that's where you're wrong. It has everything to do with me. Because he is with me now. He belongs to me. And you are getting in the way." The conversational tone vanished, replaced by a razor's edge. "So here's how this is going to go," Kev said, his voice now a low, menacing growl. "You are going to disappear from his life. You will not talk to him. You will not look at him. If you see him in the street, you will cross to the other side. You will become a ghost. You will cease to exist in his world. Because if you don't..." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the unspoken threat fill the room until it was almost impossible to breathe. "If you don't leave him and Suggers alone," Kev finished, his voice utterly devoid of emotion, "I will kill you." The words hung in the air between them, stark and absolute. There was no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. Aaron stared into Kev's dead eyes and saw the truth of the statement reflected there. This wasn't an idle threat made in the heat of the moment. It was a calm, rational declaration of intent. It was a business proposition where Aaron's life was the collateral. Aaron's mind reeled. Was it a bluff? A scare tactic? He looked at the man standing in his home, a man forged in the brutal ecosystem of prison, a man who had claimed Robert Sugden as his property, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it was not. Kev saw the flicker of understanding, of fear, in Aaron's eyes and knew he had made his point. He gave a final, dismissive look around the apartment. "This conversation never happened," he said, turning and walking to the door. He opened it, then paused on the threshold, looking back at Aaron one last time. "He's mine now," he repeated softly. "Don't forget it." And then he was gone, leaving Aaron alone in the violated sanctuary of his home, the silence ringing with a threat that was now a living, breathing entity in the room with him. The game had changed. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about survival. For a long time after Kev left, Aaron didn't move. He stood frozen, the ghost of Kev's threat clinging to the air like poison gas. The silence in the apartment was absolute, a roaring void where the ticking of the clock sounded like a countdown to oblivion. Then, his composure, the iron will that had held him together through the cafe, the pub, and the confrontation, finally shattered. With a guttural roar of pure, undiluted rage, he swept his arm across the coffee table, sending a mug, a stack of mail, and a remote control flying across the room. The mug hit the far wall and exploded into 100 porcelain fragments, the sharp crack echoing the splintering of his own control. It wasn't enough. The violence in his blood demanded a greater release. He paced the room like a caged animal, his fists clenched, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I will kill you." The words played on a loop in his mind. It wasn't the fear of death that consumed him, but the sheer, unadulterated fury at the violation. His home. His life. His secrets. All of it laid bare and trampled upon. Where was Robert in all this? The question burned through his rage. Was he sitting in the pub with Kev right now, laughing, oblivious? Or worse, was he complicit? Did he know Kev was coming here? Did he sanction this? The thought was a fresh twist of the knife. Robert knew what Kev was. He had too. He had survived prison because of him. He knew the darkness Kev was capable of. Aaron's hand went to his pocket, his fingers hovering over his phone. Call the police? And say what? A man threatened me, but there are no witnesses, no proof. They would see it as a domestic dispute, a lover's spat. They would see him as the jealous ex, the exact role Kev had cast him in. He was trapped. Meanwhile, back at the BB, Robert was growing impatient. He'd finished his pint and was scrolling through his phone. When Kev finally walked in, Robert looked up, annoyed. "Where have you been?" "I was about to send out a search party." "Just stretching my legs," Kev replied smoothly, his demeanor betraying nothing of the chilling encounter that had just transpired. He sat down opposite Robert, picking up his own pint. "Needed to clear my head." "Everything all right?" Robert asked, sensing a subtle shift in Kev's mood. He saw a new tension in his shoulders, a hardness in his eyes. "Never better," Kev said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking about our future. About putting the past behind us. For good." He looked directly at Robert, his gaze intense. "That's what you want, isn't it, Rob? No more complications? No more looking back?" Robert, misinterpreting the intensity as passion, as a desire for their new life, smiled back. "Of course. It's just you and me now. The past is dead." But Robert was wrong. The past wasn't dead. It was wounded, cornered, and about to become dangerously unpredictable. That evening, unable to bear the oppressive silence of his apartment, Aaron went for a drive. He had no destination, he just needed to move, to feel the engines rumble beneath him, to see the world fly by in a blur of light and shadow. He found himself on a deserted back road, miles from the village, and pulled over, cutting the engine. Under a sliver of a moon, the world was cast in shades of black and gray. It was then that he saw it. Further down the road, another car was parked in a secluded lay-by, its engine off, its lights out. As Aaron watched, a figure got out of the driver's side. Even in the gloom, the silhouette was unmistakable. It was Kev. A moment later, another car pulled up, its headlights cutting through the darkness before being abruptly switched off. A man got out, a large, burly figure shrouded in a heavy coat. Aaron ducked down in his seat, his heart pounding. This wasn't a friendly meeting. The body language was tense, furtive. He watched as the new man handed Kev a thick, heavy-looking envelope. Kev took it, but then the man grabbed his arm, pulling him closer, his gesture sharp and angry. Their voices were too low to hear, but the menace in their exchange was palpable. Kev wrenched his arm away, said something short and sharp, and got back in his car. The other man stood watching for a moment before getting back into his own vehicle and speeding away in the opposite direction. Kev didn't leave immediately. He sat in his car for a full 5 minutes. Aaron saw the brief, bright flare of a lighter, the orange glow illuminating Kev's face. He wasn't calm or triumphant. He looked stressed, cornered. The swagger and cold control from Aaron's apartment were gone, replaced by the look of a man in deep, serious trouble. Suddenly, everything clicked into place for Aaron with a terrifying clarity. The full wallet Robert had mentioned. Kev's desperation to keep Robert close. The over-the-top possessiveness. This wasn't just about love or jealousy. Kev wasn't just protecting his relationship, he was protecting his investment. Robert, with his local family and ties to the village, was Kev's anchor, his cover, his key to a legitimate life. Whatever trouble Kev was in, whatever dangerous world he was still a part of, Robert was his shield. And Aaron, by being a complication, wasn't just threatening their relationship. He was threatening Kev's entire setup. He was a loose thread that could unravel everything. The threat to kill him wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a calculated business decision. As Kev finally started his engine and drove back towards the village, A new, dangerous idea began to form in Aaron's mind. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but now it was joined by something else. Leverage. Kev had a secret. A dirty, dangerous secret. And now, so did Aaron. He started his car, the engines roared a defiant cry in the night. He was no longer just the victim. He was no longer just the ghost at the feast. He was now the hunter. The game had a new player, and the rules had just been rewritten. He turned the car around and headed back to Emmerdale, a plan beginning to take shape in the darkness, a plan that was reckless, terrifying, and perhaps, the only way he was going to survive. He was going to find out what Kev was hiding, and he was going to use it to burn Kev's world to the ground. The drive back to Emmerdale was a metamorphosis. The man who had driven out into the desolate countryside, a creature of pure, undirected rage and fear, did not return. In his place sat someone else, forged in the crucible of that roadside revelation. The frantic, hammering panic in his chest had cooled, solidifying into something dense, heavy, and cold. It was the birth of purpose. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was no longer a paralyzing agent. It was fuel. He saw the village lights not as a welcoming beacon of home, but as the illuminated grid of a chessboard. Every street, every building, was now a potential advantage or a potential trap. He parked the car not outside his flat, a place that no longer felt safe, but down a side street, melting into the shadows. He was thinking like a different man now. He was thinking like his prey. Sleep was an impossibility, a distant country he had no passport for. Instead, he sat in the dark of his living room, the shattered remains of the mug still littering the floor, and he began to plan. Brute force was out of the question. That was Kev's world, a game Aaron would lose before it even began. He couldn't go to the police, not yet, not with a ghost of a story about a shadowy meeting. He needed proof. He needed a weapon. And to forge a weapon, he first needed raw material. His mind, sharpened by adrenaline, went back to the meeting. The cars. Kev's was a known quantity. But the other one. It was dark, but Aaron was a mechanic. His eyes were trained to see details others missed. It wasn't a standard family saloon. It was something with power, something low-slung. He replayed the moment its headlights had been cut, the faint glint of moonlight on a distinctive alloy wheel pattern. He remembered the throaty cough of its engine as it sped away. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was the first stone he could turn over. The next morning, Aaron moved with a chilling deliberation. He went to work at the garage, the familiar routine a welcome cloak for the storm raging within him. He greeted Kane with a quiet nod, his expression unreadable. Kane, who could read Aaron better than anyone, shot him a questioning look. "You all right?" Kane asked, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Heard Robert's new fella is a piece of work." "He's nothing," Aaron replied, his voice flat and devoid of its usual emotional charge. "Not my problem anymore." The lie was so convincing, so complete, that even Kane seemed to accept it, though a flicker of doubt remained in his eyes. This wasn't the heartbroken, furious Aaron he expected to see. This was someone colder, more contained. It was unsettling. Aaron's real work began during his lunch break. He didn't eat. He went to the small office, closed the door, and got to work on the computer. He started with broad searches, looking for high-performance cars reported in the area, scouring local enthusiast forums, looking for any mention of a vehicle matching the vague description he had. It was a needle in a haystack, and hours yielded nothing but frustration. He needed more. He needed to talk to someone who navigated the gray areas, someone who knew the language of the underworld. There was only one person he could ask. It was a risk, a massive one. It meant showing a card he wanted to keep hidden, and it meant putting himself in debt to a man whose currency was favors and secrets. That evening, he found Caleb Milligan at the scrapyard, overseeing the crushing of a rusted-out van. The screech of tortured metal was a fitting soundtrack for Aaron's state of mind. Caleb turned as Aaron approached, his expression a mixture of surprise and shrewd assessment. "Aaron. To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't tell me you're looking for a part for that classic of yours." "I need a favor, Caleb," Aaron said, getting straight to the point. There was no room for small talk. Caleb leaned against a stack of tires, crossing his arms. He was intrigued. "A favor? That sounds serious. What's on your mind?" "I need to know about a car," Aaron said, keeping his voice low, even amidst the industrial noise. "Dark color, possibly a high-end Audi or a Merc, custom alloys. Might have been seen on the backroads north of the village last night. I need to know who owns a car like that around here. Someone who isn't exactly legitimate." Caleb's eyes narrowed. The friendly uncle persona vanished, replaced by the cool, calculating businessman who had built an empire on knowing things he shouldn't. "That's a very specific, and a very dangerous, question to be asking. This wouldn't have anything to do with the new arrival in the village, would it? The one who seems to have you on edge." "This has everything to do with me staying safe," Aaron countered, his gaze unwavering. "Someone's making threats. I need to know who I'm dealing with." He omitted the most crucial details, that the threat came from Kev, and that Kev was the one meeting this mystery car. He framed it as an external problem, a random encounter. Caleb studied him for a long, silent moment. He knew he wasn't getting the whole story, not by a long shot. But he also saw the steel in Aaron's eyes, a look he recognized and respected. It was the look of a man pushed into a corner who had decided to fight back. "All right," Caleb said finally. "I might know a few people who keep an eye on unusual traffic in the area. No promises. And Aaron," he pushed himself off the tires, his voice a low warning, "be careful what you go looking for. Sometimes, the rocks you turn over have things under them that are better left undisturbed." "I'll take that chance," Aaron said. As he walked away from the scrapyard, he felt a flicker of the old fear. He had just stepped off a cliff, hoping he could build a parachute on the way down. Later that night, as he was locking up the garage, a car pulled into the forecourt. It was Robert. Aaron's stomach tightened into a cold knot, but he forced his face to remain a mask of blank indifference. "Aaron, can we talk?" Robert asked, getting out of the car. He looked tired, strained. "Nothing to talk about," Aaron said, not looking at him, focusing on the padlock in his hands. "Look, I know Kev can be a bit much," Robert started, his voice placating. "He's just protective. What he said in the pub about Gordon. That was out of line. I never should have." "Doesn't matter," Aaron cut him off, finally turning to face him. His eyes were cold, distant. "It's in the past. Like you said." The lack of emotion stunned Robert. He had come prepared for an argument, for tears, for accusations. He was ready to charm, to apologize, to manipulate. He had no defense against this chilling apathy. It was like talking to a stranger. "That's it?" Robert asked, bewildered. "You're just fine?" "I'm moving on," Aaron said. The words were for Robert, but also for Kev, who he knew could be watching from anywhere. He had to play his part. He had to be the defeated ex who had taken the hint. "Like you told me to. So you and Kev can enjoy your whatever it is. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm tired." He turned and walked away, not looking back, feeling Robert's confused, unsettled stare on him the entire time. He heard Kev's voice in his head. "You will become a ghost," and a grim, humorless smile touched his lips in the darkness. He would be a ghost, all right. But ghosts have the power to haunt. Just as he reached his flat, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. It was Caleb. "You were right to be cautious." Caleb's voice was grim, stripped of all its usual charm. "The car you described belongs to a man named Marcus Thorne. He's not local. He's a known associate of some very heavy people from the city. They're not into scrapyard cars, Aaron. They're into enforcement, intimidation, and making people disappear." There was a pause. Aaron could hear the unspoken question in the silence. "What's his connection to Emmerdale, Caleb?" Aaron asked, his own voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Caleb admitted. "But a man like Thorne doesn't make social calls to a village like this. He's here for business. And his business is always bloody." Aaron hung up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. Marcus Thorne. The name felt heavy, dangerous. He finally had a piece of the puzzle. But as Caleb had warned, turning over the stone had revealed something venomous and ugly. Kev wasn't just an ex-con trying to go straight. He was actively involved with a violent criminal element. Aaron looked out his window at the sleeping, peaceful village below. No one knew. No one saw the serpent that had slithered into their midst. But he did. And the knowledge was a terrifying, empowering burden. He now knew the name of the beast. The next step was to find out where it slept. The name Marcus Thorne was a brand on Aaron's mind. It was no longer a vague, shadowy threat. It had a form, a history, a reputation written in blood and fear. Caleb's warning echoed in the silence of his flat. His business is always bloody. This knowledge changed everything. He was no longer just dealing with Kev, the prison-hardened bully. He was dealing with an organized, professional darkness that had extended its tendrils into his village. Panic was a luxury he could not afford. He spent the next day in a state of hypervigilance, every passing car on the street a potential threat, every unknown number on his phone a possible prelude to violence. He was a man walking on a wire over a canyon, and the only way to survive was to not look down. He needed a new plan. A direct approach was suicide, and passive observation was too slow. He needed to get closer, to understand the mechanics of the operation Kev was running. And the only door to Kev's world had a familiar, hated name on it, Robert Sugden. He had pushed Robert away with a chillingly effective performance of indifference. Now, he had to reel him back in, just enough to get what he needed. He had to lay a trap, and Robert would be the unwitting bait. The next afternoon, he picked up his phone and made the call. Robert answered on the second ring, his voice wary. "Aaron? Your car," Aaron said, his tone clipped and professional, the voice of a mechanic, not a former lover. "The mow is due. It'll fail on that front tire, the tread is gone. Bring it by the garage tomorrow morning. I'll fit you in." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, right. I forgot. Thanks, Aaron." "Don't thank me. It's my job," Aaron replied coolly. 9 a.m. Don't be late. He hung up before Robert could say anything else. The move was perfect in its simplicity. It was plausible, professional, and created a legitimate reason for them to interact in a space that Aaron controlled, the garage. More importantly, it would separate Robert from his shadow, if only for an hour. Kev wouldn't think twice about Robert taking his car for a routine service. It was a Trojan horse, built of rubber and steel, and Aaron was about to wheel it through the gates. While Aaron was setting his trap, the serpent was on the move. Miles away, in a grim industrial estate on the outskirts of Hutton, Kev and Marcus Thorne paid a visit. Their target was a small-time distributor, a man named Henderson who ran a struggling haulage company and had made the fatal mistake of getting into business with Thorne's associates. The scene was not one of explosive violence, but of chilling, quiet terror. Thorne did the talking, his voice a low, cultured purr that was far more frightening than any shout. He sat in Henderson's dusty office, calmly explaining the consequences of late payments, while Kev stood by the door, a silent, granite statue of implied brutality. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He just watched Henderson, his eyes flat and dead, and let the man's own imagination do the work. "You see, Mr. Henderson," Thorne said, examining a cheap snow globe on the desk, "we are not unreasonable men. We are investors. And when an investment fails to yield a return, we must liquidate the asset." He placed the snow globe down gently. "And in your case, your most valuable assets are your kneecaps. There are, I believe, still fully functional. I would hate for that to change." Henderson, a man twice Kev's age, was sweating profusely, his face the color of ash. "I'll have the money. I swear. Next week. I just need more time." "Time," Thorne mused, "is the one commodity we do not trade in." He nodded once, a barely perceptible motion, to Kev. Kev moved from the door. He walked over to a pallet of goods and, with one casual, powerful kick, shattered the wooden frame, sending boxes crashing to the concrete floor. The explosive sound made Henderson flinch as if he'd been shot. "This is your final extension," Thorne said, standing up and straightening his immaculate coat. "We'll be back on Friday. With a drill. Have a productive week." They left Henderson a trembling, broken man in the ruins of his office. As they walked back to Thorne's car, Kev felt a surge of adrenaline. This was his world. This was control. "He'll pay," Kev grunted. "Of course he'll pay," Thorne said dismissively. "They always do, eventually. I'm more concerned about your situation in the village. This Sugden character. Is he secure?" "He's solid," Kev said, a little too quickly. "He's with me. His ex, the one I told you about, he's backed off. No more problems." "See that he stays no problem," Thorne warned, his eyes like chips of ice. "Loose ends are for amateurs, Kevin. Don't be an amateur." The unspoken threat was clear: fail to control your small-town drama, and you will become a liability I have to liquidate. The next morning at the garage, Robert arrived promptly at 9. He seemed nervous, uncertain of the reception he would receive. Aaron was all business, pointing to the hydraulic lift. "Drive it on. Keys in the ignition." As the car was raised into the air, Aaron began his work, his movements efficient and practiced. For a few minutes, the only sounds were the whir of the air wrench and the clatter of tools. Robert stood awkwardly, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "So," Robert began, trying to break the silence. "Thanks for this. I know you didn't have to." "Tires bald. It's a danger on the road," Aaron said, not looking up from his work. He started to probe, his questions wrapped in a sheath of professional detachment. "Kev not with you today?" "No, he had some business to take care of," Robert replied. "He seems to have a lot of business for a guy who just got out," Aaron commented, his voice casual. "He checked the pressure on another tire. Must have a lot of savings tucked away." "He did all right for himself inside," Robert said defensively. "Made connections. I'll bet," Aaron muttered, just loud enough for Robert to hear. He moved to the front of the car. "I need the locking wheel nut key. It's not in the side pocket. Check the glove box." Robert leaned into the car and opened the glove compartment. As he rummaged through the collection of old receipts and service papers, something small and black slid out from behind the owner's manual and fell into the footwell with a soft thud. "What was that?" Aaron asked, his heart suddenly beating faster. Robert reached down and picked it up. It was a cheap, disposable mobile phone. "A burner." He frowned. "Don't know. Never seen this before. Must be Kev's." This was it. The moment. Aaron's mind raced. He had to get that phone. Probably just an old one, Aaron said, feigning disinterest. He walked over to his toolbox. Here, I've got a master key that'll work. Don't worry about it. He deliberately fumbled with a large set of keys, making a show of finding the right one. As Robert's attention was diverted, Aaron leaned against the open car door, his hand dropping casually to the passenger seat where Robert had placed the phone. In one smooth, imperceptible movement, his fingers closed around it, and he slipped it into the deep pocket of his overalls. Right, got it, he said, turning back to the wheel. His heart was a drum against his ribs. The phone felt like a block of ice against his leg. He finished the tire change in a blur, his mind a million miles away. He lowered the car, his movements mechanical. All done, he announced. Robert paid, still looking unsettled by Aaron's coldness. Aaron, about the other day. It's done, Robert, Aaron said, handing him the receipt. Car's safe to drive. That's all that matters. Robert looked at him, searching for a crack in the armor, but found none. He sighed, defeated, and got into his car. Right. Well, see you around. As Robert drove away, blissfully unaware, Aaron leaned against the garage door, his legs suddenly weak. He pulled the burner phone from his pocket. It felt alien in his hand, a physical link to the dark world that had invaded his life. He had the bait. He had the key. Now, all he had to do was put it in the lock, knowing that on the other side, a monster was waiting. He had to get the information off it, and fast. Because it was only a matter of time before Kev realized his secret line to Marcus Thorne was missing. And when he did, he wouldn't just be making threats. He would be coming to collect.